Hello everyone. Welcome to our next video and welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about the world that we find ourselves in. You look outside, and if you're in the right part of the world, or the best parts, I guess, as in quality of life, well, we can't even say the quality of life, the quality of things. You find beautiful sunshine, parks, recreation places, trees, the flowers, everything seems to be prospering, bright blue skies and warm sunshine. That's what you see in some parts of the world. In other parts of the world, we have fires, floods, droughts, devastation, hundreds of refugees fleeing war torn areas or drought areas and dying at sea in some cases, and in the United States they have even put up barrels across the river on the southern border that have barbed wire in between them, and several people have been caught trying to cross the river on that barbed wire and have drowned. So the world is not as beautiful as it seems for some people. People always talk about us being grateful and how powerful gratitude is, but any of you out there who have seen horrible things and can really identify with them know that it's not very easy to be grateful sometimes, because it seems as though we're grateful that we're not as bad off as other people. I'd like to clarify that today. The reason I think I can clarify it is because that is the issue with me a lot of times. It's hard for me sometimes to be grateful and to find joy and peace and happiness with all of the horrible things going on in the world. I think, though, that it is necessary for us to begin to do that so that we can have the power to shift things, so we can have the power to change things. It's only by having positive energy that we will be able to help make the world a better place, and that we'll maintain ourselves as healthy and strong people with a vision and a power to change the world. You see, despite what those people in charge tell us day after day, the world and the universe is not this horrible place where everything has to fight and everything has to strive to survive. It's not a Darwinian world. Darwin was wrong. It is a world of abundance, and it is a world that we human beings can shift if we ever get together in order to be a world of justice, equity, and compassion. Even today, we could end all world hunger. We could end many of the droughts. Or we could send water and food to those people who are suffering from those droughts, from the places that have plenty. But we choose not to do that. And that is what brings about a lot of mental suffering for those who have a good heart and would like to help. Despite this, though, going to bed when it is quiet, not worrying about bombs hitting your house or your school, not having to live on the street or to live in tent cities is a blessing. So it is good for us to be grateful not for what is not happening to us, or not because we have more than other people, but because of what we have. That's it. And because of the possibilities that we have to work to make the world a better place. If you haven't noticed, we are at war right now. Some people call them culture wars. That's nonsense. It's not culture wars. It's small groups of people trying to impose their will on other people. People call it information wars. That's not the case. It has nothing to do with wars. It has to do with people trying to use propaganda to manipulate their fellow citizens and manipulate the world in order to once again force their way of seeing things and their way of life on other people. The war you see is the same war that has been fought ever since one group of people thought that they were better than the others and thought they had the right to impose their way of life on them. And that is the war against freedom. And many of our leaders and most of our governments have been engaged in the war against freedom since the beginning of the state. It was either the war against freedom of the outsiders or the war against the freedom of the insiders, of all of those people who they forced to get out of their villages or to give up the power of their villages and their towns and their cities in order to create a big state that would be run by a small group of people who would take taxes, who would force them to join armed forces, who would take part of their surplus, who would garner the creativity of the people under the power of these states in order to fulfill the vision of the state. Now, many of the states and countries said they weren't doing this. They said they were democratic, and what they were going to do is listen to what the people wanted in order to support them and to create a healthy society and bring forth justice. But nowadays, most governments don't even pretend to do that. They never listen to the majority of the people anymore. They count corporations as people and as the only ones who really matter. The others are secondary. Instead of being owners of the country, stockholders, so to speak, we have become employees or contracted workers, slaves of the state instead of owners, and those who are supposed to represent us constantly treat us that way. So we find ourselves in a war for freedom and justice because they are constantly waging war against freedom. And if you look around the world, with all of the conflict in the world and all of the governments fighting in the world, you will see that it's about the same thing. A small group of people trying to take the freedom of a larger group of people away from them. And even with complex things happening, like the war in Ukraine and the fighting with Russia and Ukraine and all those other nations, on the surface it seems that the freedom that they're fighting for is the freedom of Ukraine to join NATO. And this is all well and good, but if you look deeper, we see it is not about that. It is a war because Ukraine is being used to take away the freedom of Russia by encircling it with military and NATO bases. At the basis of almost every war, we can see the attempt of one country to take away the freedom of the people of another one. And within the countries, we can see violence and fights where we see people trying to take away the freedom of people in their own countries, whether they be ethnic minorities, racial minorities, poor people, whatever. They are constantly having to strive to maintain their freedom. And so, to be a freedom fighter, you see, one has to enjoy the taste of freedom. And that is where gratitude comes in. Gratitude is our taste of freedom. And no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, if we can find that little piece of beauty and that little piece of wonder in life, and if we can hold on to what is good, and if we can choose what is good, no matter how limited our choices, choose it responsibly with power, we will be free. And as we learn to dance the dance of life and to enjoy ourselves and to fill our hearts with joy and love, this freedom will expand outwards through our thoughts, through our behaviors, through organizing with other people in our communities and in our nations to make this freedom available fully and completely, not only for us, but for all people. We will beat back those who try to enslave us in many different ways and on many different labels. It is time for us to create a pluralistic, multicultural, loving society where people are left alone to live their lives the way they want as long as they aren't damaging anyone else. That is what we fight for. And the very act of finding wisdom, finding joy, finding beauty, and being that wisdom, that joy, and beauty is the first step at destroying those who wage war on freedom. And that is what we can all choose to do right now. And we can carry that torch of freedom, of love and liberty into the world, chasing away the darkness, beating it back, and converting that energy into life. There's a saying on an Earth, Wind, and Fire song where it says, I can teach you wonders of life and love and all it does, but show me how to give to you a love that makes your dream come true. When we put ourselves in that verse, in the place of I, we will have overcome. Namaste, everyone. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell, and leave a comment, if you will. We hope to get many subscribers to help us go forward, putting forth this message of freedom, love, life, and practical spirituality. Namaste, folks.